Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversation. This week we're joined by Jon Beckstrand, who is the CEO of MasterControl. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy. We will open it up for Q&A from the audience in the end. So if there's any questions you'd like to ask that weren't addressed. Also, Slope Summit, September 29th and 30th. With that, let's start with, for those that don't know, if you give a quick summary of what is MasterControl.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe MasterControl and what it is to think of the last time that you went to a hospital and think of the products that were used in your care. So you're probably stuck with something, had something inserted in your body. Some people actually had a pacemaker, a device, a drug, all these products that were used in your care. But most likely you didn't think about whether those were good products. You didn't think about the quality of them, right? Because that's something that we are lucky enough to take for granted. And it's because of the people that we sell our product to, right? Quality managers and manufacturing operators who built and maintain the quality of that device. And the way that they do that is it's regulated, so they comply with what's called GMP regulations, which is part of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, right? And in order to comply with GMP, they have to, this is really exciting stuff, right? Very exciting. They have to document their process. They have to make sure that people are trained on their process. And then they have to show that any changes that they make to that process are controlled, and they're dealing with any events, external events that would precipitate change, like an adverse event, a customer complaint, a supplier change, a supplier nonconformance, and so forth. And so, and also they have to manufacture it in a way where they're documenting the process all the way through and handling all the issues that may come up. So that's kind of what we do, is we help those quality and manufacturing professionals comply with those regulations and produce that quality product and build that societal trust in healthcare that we all get to take for granted. So,
very cool. Great explanation. I was in the hospital last week, but my wife was having the baby, so I was just sitting in a chair. And but yeah, there were needles, there were monitors, there were beds, and I know for a fact the process control works on the bill, because they don't forget anything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, you're hoping that the IVs are clean, the needles are clean, everything's working well. But also, for those companies, translates to more revenue, less lawsuits, all of that. And that's where MasterControl would come in, right?
Sure, and then also just getting products to market, period, right? The regulatory burden creates, anywhere from 2 years to 6 months friction in getting a new product to market. So you think of all the innovations that are stacked up right now that we can all benefit from as a society, right? And those will all have to go through a pretty intense process of regulation to get to us, right? Now with the COVID vaccine, that happened a lot faster than normal, right? And that's because there were a lot of politics behind getting that out very quickly. But usually it takes a lot longer than that. And a lot of it is because of the regulations that need to be followed to get there. So MasterControl's mission is to get great products to more people sooner, get life-saving, life-changing products to more people sooner. And so we look at that, like you take like a cancer therapy that is in research right now. Can we shave 6 months or a year off the process to getting that to market? And you think of, like, for example, maybe it's a lung cancer therapy. All the people that have lung cancer within that 6-month window, all of a sudden they get the new therapy. So that's how we kind of make our mission to reality. Is what we're really trying to do is just shorten that regulatory process and also prevent any quality issues from happening as well. And that's kind of maybe toward the future of what we're trying to do. So.
Yeah. In a previous life, working for a venture fund, if there was 2 deals that came across and one was like pharma or biotech and the other one was not, I would inevitably take the other one, because even in due diligence and investing with those regulations, it's a lot more complex, let alone the companies that have to live in that world. And those are who your clients are. Like, they have a few more hurdles to jump than most.
Sure, that you take the science and the regulation and the time it takes. It definitely, from a funding standpoint, especially on the drug and therapy side, it takes a lot to get one of those products to market. So the financing profile is definitely different, for sure.
Yeah, and I would have a lot more empathy with those types of companies and employees, because they kind of have like three bosses. It's the FDA, the shareholders, whoever it is, whereas like a shoe company wouldn't. And what are some of the innovations and products that you guys have used to help over the years these companies?
Well, so just to start out, one thing that is not generally known, and I think people are pretty surprised to hear this, but until about 2002, you couldn't use an electronic document in a healthcare product manufacturing process until there's a regulation called 21 CFR Part 11 that passed. And we'd been around for like 7 years at that point, and this allowed us to pivot our efforts toward life sciences companies where quality and regulation is a lot more important. But so at that point, from 2002 till now, they've basically been able to digitize all this quality and manufacturing data that was in paper before. And when I say in paper, literally because of the way that document control works, they had, in many facilities, they had them locked in a file cabinet, locked in a room with one person to access that, because everything was a controlled copy. So moving from there to a point where it's digitized and the business can actually look at this quality and manufacturing data from a digital perspective, the biggest thing that we've been able to do is just take the inefficiencies out of the process so far. The next stage is really enabling our customers to be able to use that data to make more intelligent decisions. And that's kind of the next phase. I think where most of us are, most companies digitized first, right? And now they're taking that data that's available and, well, what does it tell me? That's kind of the phase we're at right now.
Yeah. And so landing customers in the early days versus now, what was that like?
Well, in the early days, we really didn't have much of a market brand. I mean, we heavily focused on SEO. And we're really dependent upon our salesperson kind of winning the deal. Matter of fact, there's one kind of point, I think it's back in like maybe 2005, where we had a quarter where there were like 0 sales the whole quarter. And we were sitting there, it was like the last day of the quarter, last 2 days, and we had an extended board meeting. And the first day of the board meeting, we're talking about, what we're going to do, because it looks like, we're really doing poorly. Where are we going to get our funding? And the next day we had 4 large deals close, and we exceeded our number. And so the conversation completely shifted to, wow, we're really great, aren't we? Now let's go forward and continue to invest and push. So I mean, I think in the older, back in the early 2000s, it was really about the results were kind of lumpy. It was about probably salesperson performance, because we didn't have as much marketing muscle or brand muscle behind them. Whereas now it's a lot more, we're recognized as the category leader. And so it's really about like keeping that position and trying to do that same thing, having that one person win that deal, but having lots of great people that can win the many deals. So scaling that, right?
Scaling.
And the brand is much stronger behind that as well.
Yeah, which helps. You win the deal. In this example, what happens after that? What's the onboarding like, and what's the relationship after?
So traditional enterprise software product, our product takes anywhere from 3 months to 9 months to implement. It's got multiple modules and multiple stages. So a customer will buy the product, we'll meet with them, we'll build a project plan, we'll implement it, we'll go live, and then work out any kinks and hopefully be successful and sell them either the next product or sell the next manufacturing line or the next subsidiary or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and you guys have an ROI calculator on your website that I went through, mostly just putting in numbers because the questions were new to me. But that's like a good baseline, to set the hook with these folks.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because we have 2 major product lines. One is directed towards quality, And the quality product is really about helping our customers comply, because they're going to get audited by the FDA, right? And so they need to have these processes in place. And so really that is a compliance sale. So the ROI calculator doesn't, we do ROI calculators, and we think it has a great ROI, but the reason for buying isn't necessarily the ROI. They have to buy it. They have to buy something. Then on the other side, our MES that helps integrate quality and manufacturing and controls the batch record in the manufacturing process. That has a definite ROI, and that's sold to manufacturing, and that's sold based on our ROI. And so that ROI calculator is very important in the manufacturing sale. And it's interesting. I'll tell you a story about that. We've been talking to investors lately, and because we've done so much work on the ROI of our manufacturing product, we were talking to them about the turn on the ROI, which the average turn on ROI for that product is 8 months. So you can theoretically get it into your budget, right? Because it's going to save you money. And boy, immediately the discussion was always about the price. If you can do an ROI in 8 months, like let's increase the price. Which it's always that that trade-off. So when you've got a good ROI, that's one interesting thing, as you look at how much value can you derive out of the value that you're delivering. So
yeah, in the one that I went through, again, just putting in arbitrary numbers, I would have saved $16,000.
$16,000, yeah. So we should definitely increase the price for you, for sure.
Bad negotiation on my part. Okay, so you've been the CEO since.
I've been CEO since 2002.
All right. That is, in any time period, a long tenure, but in this day
Yeah,
and
I can
age,
say 20 years. It's like 20 years, like kind of right now, actually. Yeah.
if you worked for the government, you could retire at 20 years.
I could, and yeah, I can't retire from MasterControl, at least not right now.
Yeah, that's probably exceeds most CEOs' tenures. So with that, you've seen, this would be a 10-hour conversation with what you've seen over that 20 years, but I'm interested in what you've seen as far as like the business model, obviously creating new products, getting the value there, and building a team that is pretty big now. As the CEO, the buck stops with you, and that's a lot to digest, but what are some tidbits that you learn over 20 years?
Well, I think the first thing is that I think any leader in a company for that period of time with that kind of a growth, you may stay in the same role, but your job totally changes. I feel like my job is changing every year, every 2 years. Just the problems that I'm focused on and the issues within the business change. Early on, like some of the things that you go throughout every area of the business, right? You're transforming it, as you go. Like I think about like finance, right? Going from like a bookkeeper to, a team of finance professionals. What's that like, right? And implementing different products and trying to keep all the information flowing during that time. You think about like, for example, our technical support team. When I came to MasterControl, I actually didn't start MasterControl. There were about 30 employees when I came on board, and I went into the technical support team and I asked them how many calls they'd filled the last week, and they're like, we don't know. And I'm like, okay, here's a 3x5 card. Every time you answer a call, put a check on that, and let's kind of start the process, right? Till now we use ServiceNow, and we have dynamic call routing, and we have multi-layer teams and so forth. So it just, the way it transforms kind of slowly. But I think the important thing is, and I'm still in that spot where I think everyone who's part of a business, you see the way it's running right now, but you always know how it could run, right? And it's funny because every time we meet a milestone that we were, pushing and clawing to get to, it's like, okay, good. Now there's where we need to go. And it's always clear that there's something better that you need to tackle. And so I think that's probably the process that we've seen multiple times. I'll tell you one interesting thing about being CEO at a company for this long is like, a problem will come up and I'm like, we've solved that problem 3 times. Like, why can't we keep that problem solved? Like one of them, one of them that I think about is one of the ways that we expand is one of our system administrators that we've built, our system administrator of our product that we built a good relationship will move to another company, right? And inevitably, like we have system administrators that have bought our product like 4 and 5 times, right? And these people are people we know really well and we've got great relationships with. So we've had this idea in place that we should never lose a system administrator. Like when somebody quits, we should know where they're going. We should be attacking that account and partnering with them and so forth. And there's been 3 different times where we've tried to make sure that has happened. And just recently, and I was always the advocate for this, right? Just recently, that's been something that has been on our marketing team's goals, and I didn't ask for it, you know. And I'm like, I'm glad you're super concerned about it. I've solved that problem 2 different times already, and I hope you can solve it better than I did, right? But it is interesting that those things can come up over and over. That's 20 years, right? So
yeah. That's very interesting because when you join a company at your guys' level, you're going to drink from wells that you didn't dig, right? A lot of the pain has already been felt, and obviously you're joining to go to that next peak. But I had never thought through, like, looking in the past and seeing, like, Groundhog Day, right? Like, oh, I remember this from 2008, 2012. But that has to be additive for the new employees, right? Like a little bit of a history of the growth?
Sorry, what?
For the new employees, that would be like additive and helpful to like have a little bit of a brief history of what you guys have done over the previous 20 years.
Yeah, and that's obviously really difficult because in every department you're going to have a different history and different problems you've tried to solve. But I mean, we definitely like from an onboarding perspective, we talk a lot about the culture of the company and where we've been. Probably more overall culture and style than we do the specific departments, but definitely having a team that's been in place for a while, it does allow us to like talk strategy. Like I'll give you another example. We really we more or less won our market through SEO, right? And I'm not sure you can do that as well today because everybody's doing it. But back in the early 2000s, we hired a marketing VP. His name's Kurt Porritt. He lived just right in this area. And actually, another interesting thing that happens when you've been at a company for a long time is there's a lot of life events that happen. And Kurt actually passed away suddenly when he was working at MasterControl. A big event for our marketing team to handle. Very beloved at MasterControl, but he was an SEO expert. And so you think about that all of the equity he built with SEO and then bringing in a new marketing VP and trying to preserve that as, we moved to being brand focused, which makes SEO harder, which tanked our SEO results for a while, but then they've come back and then it's more sophisticated. But one of the things is, you kind of lose some of the history in those changes, and it's hard to keep it. And sometimes, honestly, it's better to let the history go and move forward with the talent that you have too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of CEOs that can't cross the chasm from, whether it's 200 employees to 400 or this amount of revenue. What are some of the leadership principles and team building principles that apply at teams of 50, 100, 500, 1,000 that in your mind are like across the board?
Well, I think the first thing is as a CEO or as a vice president, there's one of the things I think a lot about is how an organization scales. And if you think about like your average organization, or like I like to use the number 10. If you have 10 people working for an individual, right, you can have basically 111 people with two tiers, right? A CEO, 11 people, and then 110 working for them. I guess that's 112. or 10 people. Sorry, it is 111. But it doesn't actually work like that. But if you think about that, as you scale, you add layers into the organization and you add leadership, and hopefully you design it right so it's got good leverage on your leadership. But a CEO's job at a startup or a company maybe under 100 people is really managing a group of managers. And so like the people that you're talking to are making the changes. You go and do an offsite and you have your team together and you come back, that leadership team is completely aligned, right? You get somewhere in the 200 to 300 range, that no longer happens. You go do an offsite, you all agree to something, and you need to go convince so-and-so who's a critical part that this should be the strategy. And so you end up, the job of the people that are working for me changes, where they're now, like everyone working for me now is doing the job that I was doing 5 years ago in terms of they're leading a group of 100 people or more, right? And so now you got to get all those people together, which is not feasible to agree to a strategy, right? And so, how you hire, train, involve those leaders gets to be really important. And this is kind of going to be a run-on answer, if that's okay. There was a point 3 years ago where we had, so it's pre-COVID, we had all of our employees in a ballroom having dinner for our year kickoff. And I just realized there were so many people that I didn't know there. And also there were so many people that I didn't know what experience they were getting at MasterControl, right? A lot of them, I think I was talking to maybe 100 of them for maybe the first time or one of the first times. And it made me think, like, I don't know if so-and-so is coming into MasterControl and feeling the love and feeling the culture and understanding what we're trying to do. So I actually, from that meeting, I advocated and we built what was called an employee bill of rights, and it was what you should be able to expect from your leadership. And it was actually couched as a bill of rights, and it was kind of a message to all the employees and all the leaders. Look, this is what we expect from. This is our leadership brand. This is our leadership culture. We actually ended up realizing that Bill of Rights wasn't very translatable outside the U.S., so we changed it to our leadership code. But that's a major initiative at MasterControl right now is building the leadership principles and a leadership brand and a style that we can count on kind of throughout the leadership team, which now it numbers around 150 people. So it's a big team.
Yeah. So I think one of my nephews just started at MasterControl recently. So he would have had, here's what you can expect from your leaders instead of here's what we expect from you. Or both, but.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in our quarterly company meetings, we'll be talking about the leadership code and we'll be talking about aspects of it. We also have training that we're giving to the leaders. I hope that he knows what our leadership code is and that it's affecting his job in some way, for sure. But also, I hope that he's like, hey, if I want to be a leader at MasterControl or I want to be a business leader, here's a curriculum that I can start to read these books. I can see them in practice and start to understand like what works well, at least what we think works well for leadership. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of the one employee. And now you're in charge of a team of 100 that you used to do that job. If that's done incorrectly, I would assume it would end up back on your plate. And then you'd go back into like problem solving and managing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a huge part of my job is making sure that we have good leadership and also correcting problems where there are problems. And it's interesting, a lot of times we don't think of the cost of poor leadership or poor interpersonal relationships on our business. I can tell you it is a huge cost. If we bring, and we have a really distinctive culture. Our culture is It's performance oriented, but it's a high trust culture. We really talk about treating people as people, not as objects. We use the Arbinger Institute books, Leadership and Self-Deception. I mean, if you come into MasterControl as a leader and you think you're going to go just tell everyone what to do and they're going to just serve your needs, it's not going to work. And pretty soon, I'm going to be dealing with that problem, right? Because we have a really valuable workforce, and they're going to see it as really weird, and they'll even slack me and let me know, But so a lot of my job, when things aren't going well, is talking with those leaders, helping them to understand what we view as effective leadership at MasterControl, which I don't. Sometimes people talk about it like our culture is specific or weird in some way. I don't look at it that way. It's just good leadership to me, right? And leaders, they should lead through influence, not through power, right? And if you want to look at the scope of your leadership within an organization, don't look at where you sit on the org chart. Look at the influence that you have, right? And that's really what we're getting at with leadership and self-deception. That's kind of what it's about, is leading through empathy. But it definitely is a large part of my job to go find out where we're not succeeding. And hopefully though, if we're hiring right and we're encouraging our culture and teaching people about that leadership culture, hopefully there's not as much of that.
Yeah, for sure. In this market, still frothy, but a lot's changed over the last couple of years. How do you guys go about finding talent? If you have a positive interaction at the grocery store, somebody that's like really squared away and great, do you tell the HR team? Ultimately, how do the interviews go, and who makes the final decision on hiring?
Funny. You talk about the grocery store. Last President's Day, I was skiing with my son, and so it's busy. So of course we're hitting the singles line, and so multiple times that day, I had really qualified candidates on the lift, but I didn't close the deal fast enough. You got to get there really quick, because you only have till the end of the lift, because you can't follow them down the run, right? That's kind of weird. But no, we're constantly looking. But I think for us, we have a philosophy of in-house recruiting team. We sell our culture really hard. We also have referral bonuses. We hope that when someone comes into MasterControl, we're not as we haven't raised money, right? And so we're not on the radar in the Valley quite as much. We're 750 employees, and we'll be at nearly 150 million in ARR at the end of the year this year. So we're pretty sizable, but we kind of have been quiet. And so a lot of it is bringing a great engineer in. We want them to see our culture and feel like, man, this is a great place, and to go talk to their friends. And so referral bonuses is a big part of what we try to do. But our recruiting team is definitely talking to everyone that we can, and but we've been pretty successful. We've hired over 100 people already this year, and I think I probably am shortchanging my recruiting team. I don't know the exact number, but they're great.
It's a lot. You mentioned the Bill of Rights not translating well internationally, because you guys have a lot of offices outside of the United States, and for a lot of people, me and this example, it's not for the faint of heart to do international business. Again, it's a lot to talk about. What are some of the experiences you guys have had in doing that? What is a quick process and system to do that?
Well, there are a lot of technical things related to international business that we could go into. What do you think we're most interested in?
How do you decide ultimately, all right, let's be in Singapore, let's be in Italy, and then that's the easy part, and then after that, you've got currency exchanges, different rules, different regulations, different time zones. What is it like ultimately you kind of have to worry wherever the sun is up?
Right. Well, I think international expansion should be part of your evaluation of your TAM, your total addressable market, right? And for us, since we're life sciences focused, right, and we really kind of grew up as a mid-market focused company, right, definitely being in Europe and then Japan and then Asia was, like in that order, was really important for us, right? Another thing, if you're selling to an enterprise, eventually they're going to drag you. You know, if you sell to larger companies, they're going to need multinational representation. So I would say that any international expansion needs to be evaluated against the other opportunities to expand, either if you're in a small to medium to large, like the size of company, or product adjacencies, or industries, or even the disciplines within the industry. Like we sold to quality managers for a long time. Now we're selling to manufacturing. That was a significant market expansion. So to me, a geographic expansion is just a similar decision to any of those. If my customers weren't demanding, if I were just selling to customers that weren't in multiple geographies, I'd probably think hard before I would try to attack another market, because then you don't have your customers to drag you over there. You're doing it from scratch.
Yeah. I've got one or two more questions, then we'll open it up to the audience. As the CEO, over 20 years, it's been talked about a lot. Sometimes it might get lonely. There's going to be a lot of problems that end up on your desk, a lot of future plans, a lot of future growth. You're in charge of a lot. What do you do personally when it might not be clear what the answer is, or if you just want feedback or advice? What do you do?
Well, I mean, I definitely partner with my team. I have some teammates that have been around for a really long time. Our chief culture officer, Alicia Garcia, has been for over 10 years. Matt Lowe, who's currently our chief product and marketing, but also has done sales, and actually worked as a product manager before that. Our chief revenue officer, Dave Edwards, has been around for a long time. So I think definitely being able to partner with your team, and I don't think that, I mean, definitely there's an element of hey, this is my decision, and I'm gonna have to deal with it, and some things you can't partner on, but definitely partnering with my team is a big part of that. I mean, the other part is just maintaining. I do yoga, so I got a lot of ways to kind of reset, outlet, think things over, get myself in a good spot. I probably would like to have more mentors. That hasn't worked as well for me, to reach out to other CEOs, and we don't have any investors. So my father is the chairman of the board. He's definitely someone that I can go to with anything, right? Because we kind of share in every problem. But he's also not involved in the business as much, so sometimes it's not the best thing to go to him. So, but there is an element of it's a little bit lonely to make some of the decisions, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So you've mentioned a few times bootstrapped, no investors. Is that possibly going to change in the future?
Yeah, we've actually been in a process over the last year. It's funny because we actually started a process of bringing in our first investor, and right as inflation and the Iraq War, we were right in the middle of our process right there, and so we had all of the big private equity names that we're talking to. Right in the middle of the May timeframe, when all of our tech IPOs went down 60% and valuations changed. So, the process has taken a lot longer. So we've kind of been really introspective about okay, do we want to really bring our first investor in a market that's, I don't know, you could argue whether it's adjusted or it's gone back to the mean. I think everybody has their own opinion about that, but we're a pretty scarce asset, right? Reached 100 million of annual recurring revenue without any other investors. So it's a lot of interesting conversations. But we're still in the thick of it, and we may end up doing a deal this year. If not, we'll probably wait to see the market adjust a little bit and go out next year. So.
Yeah, I think you guys would have to be an outlier. I could be wrong, looking for money 20 years down the road instead of 2 minutes after you got your pitch deck ready to go.
Yeah, it's definitely different, but there actually are a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of private equity companies who are looking for founders that have built businesses that are already substantial, and they feel like they can come in and, you think of like a Thoma Bravo or a Vista, like they're the ones that are really aggressive, right? Where they go and have like a playbook of how they improve your company, right? So they have these teams when they go and buy control interest, because they can go change the company around however they want, right? But when you look at a minority interest, those same kinds of companies like the Blackstones, Carlyle's, Bains, so forth, they're all looking for minority investments so they can apply those operating assets to really help build the teams as well. So it's been an interesting ride to go through that. So
yeah, those types of transactions with the names that you just mentioned, very nuanced, but like they do not mess around. Like they're pretty dialed in. Their playbooks have been pretty well defined. So it sounds like that'll be a really fun journey. Cool. Well, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. We have a microphone.
Hello. Just wanted to ask, this might be a little off subject, but just like what, of the 20 years experience of being a CEO, like what was one of your biggest failures that you've experienced, but that you learned the most from?
Oh, geez, I know what my biggest failure is, but I don't want to tell you guys all about it. It's too embarrassing. But I'll talk about it without giving specifics. But I've had, it's funny, as a smaller company, you can you can do a lot of things that you can't do as a larger company. Right, because you have relationships with all the people, and they kind of understand where you're coming from, and so early on, MasterControl's its culture. There were a lot of practical jokes, and I ended up taking a practical joke a little too far, and had to call a lot of people, and personally apologize to them. And to this day, I'm like, my HR director, why did you let me do that? But, and it was all in trying to, there was a lot of things that were really successful and made people feel really great. As an example, 1 year, this is not an example of a failure, this is a success. 1 year, mid-year, we had one rep that was just killing it, right? And so we made a joke that he was using performance-enhancing drugs. And so we as a joke, distributed, they weren't real, but, and at the end of the year, we actually had the police come in and arrest our team for using performance-enhancing drugs. And then we got a picture of them in jumpsuits with the number that they hit, I thought that was a pretty cool, it was a practical joke, and it was funny, and nobody got bent out of shape, but, that's the one thing I learned as you get to be a larger company. You got to be a little more careful, but also, man, check yourself before you in an organization. You got to be a little careful. I would say like one of the biggest learnings though that I've had is that as you scale, problems reintroduce themselves. And then another one is that as you scale also and you bring leaders on, every leader represents both an opportunity for success and an opportunity for failure. And those are really, really critical, not just in the hire, but in onboarding and continuing to make sure that leader's going to be successful.
So it sounds like there might have been some fun times over the years.
Yeah, there was some fun. Yeah, we don't have fun anymore though. Actually, we still have some fun. It's just a lot more, it's a lot less risky, let's say, yeah.
What are some of the biggest interpersonal challenges your managers face?
I think like the thing that I've seen the most, and a lot of times when someone comes into a leadership position, they've been kind of watching their leader, right? And they've been like, when I'm in that role, this is how I'm going to do it. And you kind of get the idea, and this happens a lot, that like the people that work for you, they just all kind of work for you, and they're there to like serve you and make you you work, right? And so a lot of people come into a leadership role and they think like, I'm the person now. Everyone has to do what I say, right? And so when you take, I think the biggest interpersonal challenge I've seen with leaders is leaders that think that because they're in a seat that people are going to do what they say, right? And they don't recognize that influence in leadership is earned, right? And that in my role, even though I technically have the ability to make like just about anything happen in the company, the times that I use like just pure the CEO's seat to get a decision done are few and far between. And I view every time that I do that as it tends to erode the trust that I have with the individuals. So I'm always, and it's kind of a power versus finesse, right? When you're using your influence, it's finesse, right? And that's probably the biggest interpersonal challenge. The other one is just not understanding why trust is low. And so one of the books we use a lot is Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. It breaks trust down into 12 different categories. Trust is not something that's ethereal out there that like you either have or you don't. Trust is something that can be broken down and it can be built. So I think the other thing is just like, we're having trust issues. Why don't we trust each other? Let's break it down and try to figure out how we can make it better. Probably those are a couple things. So,
what challenges have you encountered with this woke culture change? You've been in the business for 20 years. You've seen a definite change in the attitude of workers these days. Could you touch on how you deal with that?
Well, to me, I mean, I'm not really like to look at it like it's a like in our business. I don't think we have like a. I really don't like to use the term like a woke culture. I understand that that's a brand we put on it, it's the way we talk about it, but really we're just talking about respecting each other. And to me, like that's an absolute at MasterControl, is respecting people despite their individual differences. And so like, man, if we see disrespect for people because of a particular characteristic, that's something that we crack down on really hard. I would say like as far as, I don't feel like as a CEO that my job is to be an evangelist for any particular political cause. And so we definitely avoid that. We avoid, at our company, we don't have religious or political discussions in our Slack channels. I mean, we still have some, but when we see it, we politely talk to people about it. So I would say at MasterControl, it really hasn't been an issue, and we have a lot of diverse views. So that's not, and we actually strive for that. But to us, like building a culture of respect and not letting it get to a point where things are really political. I mean, I've had situations where I've personally called a number of individuals of a particular type and asked them, hey, how are you experiencing this? But I didn't broadcast that to my team or anything like that. That was just like, hey, we're trying to make it great for everyone here. And so I think as long as you stick to it that way, I think you can, take the positive of that culture and build it into yours. I think that can be done. We've been able to do it so far. So I think.
One last question, if anyone's got it. All right. Thank you so much, Jon. This has been great, and I trust that you guys are good at practical jokes now, if we're going to go.
No, we don't do them anymore.
No,
No more practical jokes.
The older you get, the less fun you have, I guess.
That's true.
But thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.